Hey guys, Ramsey here. Welcome to another video. Today we have a review. So it is Halloween here, Halloween of 2023 here in Texas. And so while everyone else is doing their Halloween or spooky lists, I am just keeping on, sticking to my plan of things that I've been wanting to review and talk about. And there's actually a decant that I've had in my collection for almost 3 years. Well, actually I have two decants, and they're both of the exact same juice. This is CoSTUME National Homme Parfum. Now, the original CoSTUME National Homme actually came out in 2009. I do not have that one in my collection. It was created by Dominique Ropion, and if you don't know, CoSTUME National is kind of a house that is an Italian, very small, kind of not really a niche house because they are a designer. They also sell clothes, and I believe they sold clothes at some of the very upscale brands like Barney's and stuff like that. But once they closed down, I think they kind of lost their retail presence here in the United States. Barney's went out of business, and so I think you can only buy their stuff on the website now. CoStumeNationalScents.com, I believe, is their website. And so to make matters worse, this fragrance that we're actually talking about today was not launched in the United States. I think you have to buy it from their website, or you have to go to a discounter and get it from there. Now, it is at discounters. I think retail 100 mils of this goes for about $120, which is not bad at all for this scent profile. I think it's actually a really good value for money, but I have seen it at discounters as cheap as like 80 bucks right now, which is a great deal. This is what the CoSTUME National bottles look like. They all kind of look like this. They have this concave sort of inner part of the bottle right here, and it kind of sits leaning forward. So when you see it, it kind of sits like this while it's sitting on your shelf. Has this sort of slight lean to it. And so this is actually CoSTUME National Soul, which I'll review one of these days. This is kind of a amber fragrance with some oud touches as well. It's kind of a very bright amber, actually. It's also created by Dominique Ropion. And so Dominique Ropion then came back and created this in CoSTUME National Homme Parfum. So CoSTUME National Homme Parfum is a flanker of the CoSTUME National Homme he created in 2009. Okay, now that you're all thoroughly confused, let me confuse you further. CoSTUME National has a sister house, Juicebox Parfums. And so it's kind of like, Juicebox is kind of like the niche version of CoSTUME National, but actually, I think CoSTUME National is the better house by far. And one of the things that I actually have a live stream on Juicebox fragrances, if you want to go check out my thoughts on some early impressions on a live stream. I tried some of their fragrances live. Did not like the house of Juicebox, to be honest with you. Although I do have another one that was not talked about in the live stream that many people thought is their favorite from the house that I heard. It's called 14-hour something, 14-hour dream or something. So one of these days I'll do a video on 14-hour dream. But Juicebox is sort of a niche version house created by the same folks who founded the house of CoSTUME National. Okay, so now that you are thoroughly confused, let's talk about CoSTUME National Homme Parfum from 2020. So, this is a fragrance that if you go look up reviews on YouTube, you're going to find many people in the fragrance game talking about what an amazing fragrance this is. And it's funny because outside of kind of people like me, very few people know about what a great fragrance this is. And if you listen to my brother Rich Mitch, my brother from across the pond, my brother from another mother, he says that CoSTUME National Homme smells like a Tom Ford. He has a vintage bottle of CoSTUME National Homme from early 2009, 2010. And he says it smells like a Tom Ford. And you know what? There is something to that. There's something very modern to this fragrance. However, there is also something vintage in the sense that it's kind of this warm, spicy, but also slightly cool, spicy. It's like a spicy, woody, very masculine type perfume. And so if you like things like, this is Chanel's Egoiste. If you like things like this, you know, Egoiste has this blend of sandalwood and rosewood and all, you know, these amazing ingredients. And so, you know, if you like these sort of enveloping, spicy type woody fragrances, if you like things like this is Kenzo Jungle's L'Elephant, I believe. Or, sorry, it's not correct. This is Kenzo Jungle Pour Homme for men. Discontinued, unbelievably. It's supposed to be like a zebra thing on the top. The elephant one's the women's one, excuse me. So Kenzo Jungle Pour Homme. If you like these type of spicy fragrances, this was created by Olivier Cresp. If you like something like this is Romeo Gigli per Uomo. This sort of, this also has amazing cinnamon. This early 90s cinnamon, which I've talked about on my channel a lot. Cinnamon was done differently back in the day, I feel like. And there is a special feature of the cinnamon in CoSTUME National Homme Parfum we're going to talk about later on in the review. But if you like these type of fragrances, this is created by Alberto Morillas, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, back when he actually could create some amazing scents and wasn't just pumping them out. If you like those type of spicy fragrances underpinned with sort of woods, this has some vetiver in it, and it also has some patchouli and musk. And labdanum. And the labdanum is pretty prominent. The labdanum, just imagine like a sticky labdanum. And the fragrance feels like it has this sort of depth to it. It really feels like, a luxury designer a la a Tom Ford would put out. Everything in the fragrance feels very high class, It feels very smooth and very rounded. But like I said, also something slightly vintage about it, okay? There's a little bit of sweetness, but not too much of that disgusting bubblegum sweetness. And so, for you vintage heads, if you're kind of someone like me where you are in your little rabbit hole and you're kind of tucked down and you kind of peek your head out of your hole and you look around and you go, nope, forget this, I'm going back under. And back under you go. This may be one of those fragrances where it's a newer fragrance, but you might give it a shot. You might really enjoy this one. One of those modern releases for the vintage heads is how I would describe it. So I like the fact also that they brought back Dominique Ropion to do the flanker of his own scent from 2009. I think that they allowed him to come back and kind of riff on his own work, if you will. So the Cliff Notes version is this. The original fragrance of CoSTUME National, if you will, CoSTUME National Homme, had a very prominent clove note, and almost like in a way that would clash against the other notes from what I've heard. I have not smelled it. I don't own a bottle, but from what I heard, the clove was it was almost like a wrecking ball. It went through and really clashed with the cardamom and stuff like that. Very hipster is how I've heard it described, right? And so the clove is not removed because I think I can smell some clove in CoSTUME National Homme Parfum, but I think that he really, really toned it down. Like, really toned down the cloves. I don't think he outright removed them. Like, there is no clove note listed on the note listing if you go to Parfumo. But I think the cloves have been drastically reduced, if you will. And I hear that the two scents are still very similar once they begin to dry down. And that the Parfum version is more of a sort of luxury version, if you will. It's almost like I hate saying this about something that's not a Roja Dove, but it's like it's been Roja'd up. Like he takes the DNA and tries to make it smell with that luxury blob-like smell. But Dominique Ropion does a hell of a job of actually doing it here. And I really like the scent profile. I'm a fan. I've actually been wearing this back-to-back days. I've worn these, like I said, over the last 3 years, just periodically. You can see I probably used about 5 mil. I think these are 5 mil decanters. I'm not 100% sure. 5 or 10. But you can see I've used at least 5 mil between these two here. So they let him come back and kind of riff on it. And that clove note has been extremely toned down. So if you're a clove hater, don't stop from kind of trying this here. And I think they amped up the labdanum from what I understand, because this is a much heavier version. I think the sandalwood played maybe a little bit of a bigger role in the OG. And so a few days ago on my channel, I reviewed a fragrance from Amouage, and it was called Opus 2. And you can go check out my review on Opus 2. Opus 2 is one of those fragrances from the library collection that just never really got a ton of love. Some people who know about it, very similar to the way CoSTUME National Homme Parfum acts, in that the people who know about it and really love it, they absolutely love it. Like someone came forward and say, I have 3 bottles of Opus 2, I absolutely love it, that kind of thing, right? And so mind you, as I was reviewing that fragrance, I kind of came back and said, hey, if you want like a modern equivalent of that, like a designer equivalent, you can maybe check out CoSTUME National Homme. And it made me start wearing the scent. And so I've worn it these last couple days again, and I'm reminded of the way that the cinnamon in both scents. Now, Opus 2 has a lot more going on. It has that papyrus-like feel in the dry, almost like clean oud in the dry down, even though it's not listed. And it has that green frankincense, which this does not have. But what it does have is it has this very furry, fuzzy, almost soft fleece-like feel of this very powdery, fluffy cinnamon, okay? And the cinnamon is backed up by what feels like just this Rolls-Royce engine of woods and labdanum and patchouli, okay? And it's a thick perfume. It feels thick. It feels very filled in, right? It feels extremely filled in. And so just imagine sort of a spicy spicy cardigan, right? That just engulfs you. Imagine like putting on a cardigan sweater when you're cold, right? Imagine one of those old man sweaters. I thought I had one lying around here, but I can't find it. So just imagine like a cardigan, and you put that on, and just imagine it just keeps you warm, right? That engulfing feeling is the first thing I thought about as I was smelling the way that the cinnamon mixes with all of the notes here and the spices and how it sort of really interacts and dries down. And what's crazy is once you hear the blurb from the house, it's going to make perfect sense to you because they also reference a coat, but they reference a different coat. I didn't know that when I said cardigan, when I was writing my notes here. So it really does have this sort of blanket, like enveloping feel to it. I will tell you that if you go heavy on the sprays and pay attention in the first half an hour or so, you'll really notice the citrus in the top. And it really does tend to stick around for much longer than you would assume if you go light on the sprays, okay? So if you go heavy on the sprays, the citrus notes of bergamot and grapefruit really make their presence felt. And it just adds this very zesty, creamy, kind of uplifting aspect to the scent to me. Very uplifting. And, I heard someone mention that this opening of the citruses being there, and the citruses, when you really go heavy on the trigger, and let's say you spray like 3 or 4 times in the same spot and just pay attention to the citruses for the first half hour, an hour, you realize how much more present they are than if you just go light. It seems like it just jumps right into sort of the cinnamon and the woods and the spices. And there is a little bit of an oriental aspect to it because of the labdanum. And if you go light, sometimes it feels like it just jumps right into that and the citrus is getting engulfed. But when you go heavy, I feel like I can really focus on the citruses and they stick around for longer. They last for longer. At least you can really kind of focus on them more to me. And I heard someone say that this is like walking into an arts and crafts store. And I would even go a step further and say that this is like walking into an arts and crafts store around Christmas. So imagine that your local arts and crafts store are selling things like the wreaths that you put on your front door, the Christmas trees with the fake pine needles on them, right? Just imagine that smell. There is something to it. There's something to kind of imagine walking into that store with like a hot chocolate and seeing and smelling that smell when you first walk in. And between the wreaths and the fake pine needles and all that good stuff, the fake pine cones, right? There is something in here that could almost be mistaken for maybe, something like cypress or maybe a little bit of pine, these old school vintage masculine notes. Even though there's none of them listed there, there's almost something that could make you think that you're getting a little bit of that in here. And the blend from the citrus and the cardamom really sort of, as it dries down into the rest of the fragrance, you really realize, to me, as it really goes from citruses to the cardamom to the sort of cinnamon and vetiver and patchouli, you realize, at least to my nose, that this creation is being executed by a master perfumer. You are smelling something that was created by someone who has decades and decades of experience. And usually, when I smell these type of perfumes, I could easily see this going for $250, $350 nowadays. Some niche house, Dominique wrote, if this was a Frederick Mall, this would be $350 or $400. And I think this is better than, something like Uncut Gem or something like that, to my nose. Now, I have not smelled the new Heaven Can Wait, but if you're referring to some of the previous malls like Uncut Gem, and I have a review of Uncut Gem on my channel, I would much rather wear this. And this is, you know, a quarter of the price, right? So for me, you get the experience that Dominique Ropion brings to the table. And I think that's one of the reasons why so many people kind of take a step back when they smell this and they're like, whoa, what is this? Like, how come no one talks about this? What is this? It kind of grabs you, and you can see the, on one side of the coin, you have sort of the experience. You have the experience of Dominique Ropion and what he brings to the table and what he's learned. And, you know, Dominique Ropion is described as kind of like a technician of perfume, is the way that they describe him. On the CoSTUME National website, they describe him as one of the greatest technicians in perfumery, almost like a watchmaker, a curious perfectionist watchmaker creating a fragrance, right? Daring yet instinctive, that kind of thing. And there is something to that. I mean, there's something to Dominique Ropion's style that just seems to flow. I mean, it's almost like listening to beautiful music, right? And, you know, there are people who are just musically gifted, right? I just imagine like Mozart at 5 years old sitting there playing the piano, right? There are some people that just have it and there are some that don't. And it just feels like Dominique Ropion, he has that flow. You know, there's something to his fragrances where they just flow so beautifully. And so a great combination here to me. And I think that if we go back to the whole enveloping, if you go back to the whole that cardigan scent that I meant, that cardigan feel to the way that the spices and everything kind of interacts. Let me read you the way that CoSTUME National describes the scent, or at least the timeless elegance of the scent. So what they describe it as is a merino wool overcoat. And there's actually a photo, and I'm sure just by taking a look at the guy wearing the merino wool overcoat and the way that the picture's taken, that this merino wool overcoat's going to set you back some dough. This is not a cheap coat by CoSTUME National, if they still make this kind of thing. But they call it a byword for sophistication. Of course, he's kind of looking, you can see that shadow like of the window on the wall behind him in his shadow, and he's looking towards, you know, looking towards the sunset or the rising sun to the next day. You know, there is that sort of, and of course it's going to probably be $1,095 for this coat. But they talk about this innate elegance, this attitude, this refined attitude towards beauty. But it's interesting that they also used the coat as sort of the idea, because there is something in this perfume that just feels enveloping. It wraps you, you know, it really feels like you're just surrounded, you're covered, you're under a blanket of the warmth of the way that the cinnamon and everything, the colors that you feel when you wear the scent and that kind of thing. You know, I think it's a beautiful creation, very masculine, by the way. So let me read you the little blurb, and then we'll talk a little bit about one of the ingredients and why it so stands out. So it says, CoSTUME National Homme Parfum expresses the genetic code of CoSTUME National and its essential elegance, the purity of the ingredients, and the unique made-in-Italy design. That'll add probably an extra zero to the price tag. The metropolitan and cosmopolitan spirit of CoSTUME National Homme Parfum interprets perfection in a sophisticated style, an aesthetic balance in which creative avant-garde meets the purity of modern lines and sensual harmony. So very interesting. They also talk about a little bit of this, you know, blend. In the beginning, I said it almost feels kind of, you know, interesting and daring enough for a niche head like me to stay interested in, but there's something very wearable about it. I think something a newbie would come in and just say, I want to smell nice, and, you know, this makes me smell nice, and so I like it. You know, I saw it at the store, I tried it, I liked it. There is something to where I could see both sides. They call it the aesthetic of avant-garde meets modern lines, but, you know, really it's kind of the balance of trying and being somewhat daring and indifferent versus making something very wearable and not having it to be a museum piece. You know, there are some people who hate those museum pieces in perfumery where it's like, man, it's the craziest thing I've ever smelled, but where would I ever wear this? Now, for me, I wear everything anywhere. I don't give a shit. I wear my fragrances out and about. Working from home sometimes does help, but I also wear them to the office and stuff like that as well. But this does have that sort of blend. Now, the fragrance's greatness, again, to me, I think is really like a combination of high-end materials that Costume National is using. They definitely are using quality materials, and this experienced perfumer taking those materials and creating something that's unique, and yet also appealing to the masses, to the folks who just want to smell nice, right? So it's an interesting experience. And many of the notes, when I wear them on my skin, when I smell this, it's almost like I can smell the oil. Like, imagine like smelling cardamom oil. Imagine smelling, cinnamon oil, patchouli oil, sandalwood oil, labdanum oil. Like, it has that sort of slight oiliness to it. I think the concentration here is like 23%, Costume National's website says. Although I saw a video from Sebastian who said that it was 25% or so. I don't know, but the website says 23% as of right now in 2023. So it says Costume National Homme Parfum concentration 23%. And but what's interesting is they highlight a specific signature note in this fragrance, and that is cinnamon, or what they call cinnamon essential, trademarked. And that trademark is from IFF. IFF owns a brand called LMR. LMR is sort of, if you will, IFF's high-end natural brand. So for like natural essential oils and stuff like that, IFF has their own company, LMR, that specializes in that. And what they say is that the prestigious LMR laboratory in Grasse obtains the cinnamon essence through 3 exclusive physical processes: hydrodistillation, decanting, and desorption of the bark of the cinnamon tree. So the aromatic compounds of the cinnamon water are also mixed with the essential oil, enhancing the aroma. And it says, LMR Cinnamon Essential introduces a perfect and delicate balance between spicy and delicate floral. The quintessence of cinnamon with an unmistakable sillage created in 2015. This particular material they're talking about that's being used. So this wasn't even created when the original Costume National Homme was created in 2009, is more natural and elegant, being less dry and earthy. So less dry and earthy, but more balance between spicy and floral is the way that the cinnamon smells. It says it gives body to the fragrance and is a perfect base. And so what's interesting is the cinnamon in here, it does stand out. It does make a difference. It's crazy that something so small like this can make such a difference. And I think it really does. And that goes to prove the continued sort of techniques that are being used. And so that goes back to another point, that as a vintage lover, many times I am kind of the opinion that, they're not using the quality of the ingredients that they were using in the 70s and 80s. And I think many times that is very, very true. But there's always the exception to the rule. There's always the 1 or 2 times or handful of times where, you get something that uses something modern like this, and it's used brilliantly by a perfumer. And so it's not always true that you have to have the oldest formulation. It's not always true that reformulations are bad. But if you've been watching my channel, I'm a huge vintage head. I love old fragrances. I love what they did back in the 70s and 80s. I love getting the specific vintage version before reformulations happened and all of that. This fragrance is a great example of why you should continue trying new things, even if you are not going to get a full bottle like I did. I got decants because, honestly, I don't need a full bottle. Would I like a full bottle of this? Sure. But do I need it? No. I mean, I have more than enough fragrances to wear, right? And so for me, I got some decants, and this is what I've gone through in 3 years. I got it when it came out in 2020 because I didn't want to splurge for a full bottle, and I was having a hard time finding it before it hit discounters, and that's what I've used in 3 years. But as someone who loves vintage fragrances, this is one of those things in modern perfumery where I really have to tip my hat. It's very rare where I can really take a step back and say, They did something amazing with a new type of material. It smells different. It smells unique. It smells expensive. It smells high class. It's not priced super expensive. It's priced very reasonable. It's just a lot of people, they're not familiar with the brand. And when they smell it, they don't do as deep of a dive, right? So for the frag heads out there, or even for the vintage heads, CoSTUME National Homme Parfum from 2020, I think, is a sniff. I'd love to smell the original from 2009. I hear it's very clashy, and I like that. Sometimes I like when the notes clash and it's rough and tumble and all that stuff. So this does feel smoothed out. I could totally see a, harsher version still appealing to me, but if you're someone who does not own either scent, the Parfum from 2020, I can definitely vouch for. So this fragrance review is a long, long time coming. If you just happen to watch the video today, have a safe and a happy Halloween out there. And we'll see, maybe a live stream will be coming soon, one of these days. So cheers, guys. Thanks for watching. Catch you next time. Bye-bye.